Perhaps, like me, you are feeling angry, upset, alone, frustrated, completely hopeless, helpless, afraid with the war that is raging out there in our world today. The war that's happening between Israel and Palestine is only one of many. Ukraine, Russia, and so many other parts of the world where suffering is really bringing to light a condition of separation, polarization, and disconnection in our culture. Now, if you are following me and you are used to receiving tips and tricks on how to get closer to your partner, how to listen to one another in your relationships, then what I'm going to speak about today is also supporting how we can bridge that gap, that polarization that happens with our loved ones, with the people that we are closest to. Because whether it's happening on an international, global level, or it's happening in your home, or it's happening within your own heart, there is something that we can do to move one step closer to that dream of togetherness and finally being able to live a bit closer to that peaceful wish for unity that so many of us want and don't believe it is even possible to move towards. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Heart to Heart. It's been a while since I've last been online, and this is the beginning of a new start of this podcast, which soon will be undergoing a new name. I want to start with a quote from Martin Luther King that really inspires me. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war, that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. I know that within myself there are two reactions that come up to that. One is of a deep hope and longing for that to be true. And another part is a real sense of defeatism, not believing that it's possible. Frustration and hurt and pain for how far it feels like we are from that today. And yet I do believe that there is a possibility for us to get one step closer. And so what I want to talk about today, I hope will support you to find a little bit of connection and understanding and a sense of being heard and understood for how you feel in this moment in relationship to the war within yourself, within your family, or that's happening out there in the world. So if you have been finding yourself really annoyed and frustrated with the different opinions or points of view that are being expressed in social media, in the news, or perhaps within your own family at the moment, and that leaves you to feel a little bit alone, afraid, frustrated, called to action, whatever it is that it brings up in you, angry, protective, then perhaps you start to see the others as your enemy, as the problem, as the ones that need to change, the ones that are getting it wrong. And this is absolutely natural because it's a part of the patriarchal system of better than, less than, good, bad, win or lose, that we have all been brought up in. You see, we have been socialized to believe that the only way through our pain and suffering is with force and violence, and that there is a winner and there is a loser, and that in order for our voices and our protection of love and of life to win, to be heard, then we can only move through with force. And we can only do that by making another wrong and making myself right. And by making the other wrong, by making you the one that needs to change, it gives me some hope and direction, something to focus my pain and suffering on, some hope that there will be eventually the change that I want to see in the world. And so you see, my blaming, my judging, and my pointing the finger at you is always coming from a deep care for life. It's coming from a part of me that wants the suffering to end, and that is such a beautiful thing. Yet you see, this system of domination, of I win, you lose, never wins. It never actually gets me anywhere. Because if I make you the monster, if I make you the one who is wrong and to blame, and me the one that has the correct point of view, the one that is right, the vision that needs to be adhered to, then you see we are left in this gap where we are never meeting each other. And this only leads to more acts of violence, and more acts of violence, and more acts of violence. Because every time I blame you, your voice gets louder because you do not feel heard and understood. And every time you blame me, my voice gets louder because I do not feel heard and understood. And so instead of screaming, instead of shouting, I will hit you, and I will throw stones at you, and then I will bomb you until you hear me. Until you hear what I am protecting. And of course, you are only going to do the same in order for me to hear what you are protecting. But then there is nobody left to listen. And so the cycle of violence continues. And you see, I am not at all surprised that this happens, because dehumanization, this idea that you are not human and therefore I can inflict upon you pain because the way that you behave was not human towards me, because I'm in so much pain by your actions, by the loss of life, by the horror that I have experienced. So therefore you are not human. And this dehumanization that I have towards you and that you have towards me, even if you do not see it, because by being able to act in violence, there is dehumanization happening. And dehumanization is a symptom. It's not the cause. It's a symptom of what I call the empathy gap. It is a symptom of the fact that there is nobody there to recognize and to listen to that pain exactly as it is being expressed, without needing to change anything, without any yes buts, without needing to do anything to fix it, but simply meeting each other in that place where that pain is living so deeply. Because nobody is there to listen. And when nobody is there to listen, the pain just keeps on building and building and building between us. And so we keep blaming and judging, and the blame becomes bigger and the judgments become more harsh, and the distance grows and the gap of empathy becomes wider. The medicine, the healing power of empathy in my life has been so unbelievable and continues to be. And that's why I grieve deeply that this gap of empathy is widening with every judgment, with every moment of blame that's out there on social media, that's in your own home, that's in there within myself. And so it's not about making the way that we respond right or wrong, but it's about bringing in that awareness that I need empathy. I need to be heard and understood. And that's the first and most crucial step towards making that gap smaller and bringing us closer together. Because if each of us is finding ways where we can be heard for the pain and the horror and the sadness that we hold within us, then naturally we have more space to listen and hear the other side and recognize their pain. And yet I also want to bring real focus and understanding to the gravity, the chasm that is so big that makes it so difficult to hear the other. It's almost like asking those who are victims of violence to listen to their perpetrators, which I would never, ever ask you to do. And when on both sides, on many sides, we are victims of violence, in order to even make space for there to be one person or one side or many who are available to listen first, because if nobody is available to listen first, then we continue the cycle of violence. But in order to get there, we each need to be heard for the pain that we experience as much as possible. But another part of me knows my own experience, my own personal understanding and healing from being heard many times. And so I want to offer us one small step towards that, maybe two, through an exercise that you can do with yourself, so that even if nobody else is available to listen, you can begin to listen to what you're holding on to, what's important for you, what is your life supporting message that you are carrying that means something to you, that you want to have heard and understood by the world. And if you are with a partner or with a friend or with a family member who's willing to do this practice with you, then I also have a second option for how you can begin to explore and be heard together. And so the question that I invite you to ask yourself, maybe through journaling if you're doing this alone, is what is the story of pain, hurt, despair, fear, anger, frustration that I am holding towards someone, perhaps a group of people, a particular person, an individual, a political party, a movement, a family member, a friend. And give yourself time to just write freely, Allow your voice to be expressed fully so that you don't need to hold back. And after you've done that for about 5 or 10 minutes, using the feelings and needs list that I have posted in the info section of this podcast, I invite you to have a look at that list and read through your text and underline in one colour the emotions that you feel are coming up, that you see coming up. And with another colour, the needs or the values that you hold dearly. What is it that you're standing for and that you're caring for? And at the end of that, write yourself a mission statement that is connected to the needs. This is what I am caring for. And just see how that feels in your body. If you're doing this with a friend, you can simply, instead of writing, express freely your answer to that question and ask them to listen to you for 5 or 10 minutes, mostly in silence. If you find that difficult, you can ask them to reflect back 3 words that they have heard you say whenever you need that kind of sense of the other person is hearing you. And at the end of your expression, get them to have a look at the feelings and needs with you and work as a team to find your mission statement. And then you can swap roles and do that for them too. I really hope that listening to this in some way brings connection to you, whether it's through resistance to what I've said, which I truly welcome, the wisdom of that resistance, or whether it is learning or taking something in. Please contact me. Let me know how this episode is touching you, as we hope and pray for more compassion in this world. Thank you so much for listening.